Excellent. And now we'll move on to our scheduled matters. The first is to receive an update on the progress of governing for racial equity in Monterey County. Consider adopting a resolution to proclaim the reaffirmation of Monterey County values and the commitment to ensure equitable outcomes and opportunities for every resident of Monterey County. We have Mr. Gonzalez and Ms. Soto. We're going to be here making your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to provide an update to the board on the county county government alliance on racial equity, short for GARE, our GARE team. This is an update to you and the public on what our efforts are so far. Monterey County's journey in this work is governing for racial equity. Began in early 2014, and probably earlier. Rosemary and I was speaking earlier, and I think that the health department has been actually involved in this work around that time as well. Our work began, to my recollection, in early 2014 when Supervisor Fernando Armenta and Rosemary participated in a session up in Portland, Oregon, where the northwest region of the country, the northwest region of the country have at least for 2 decades participated in GRE. The first engagement with our jurisdiction was made possible with the support of the California Endowment. In early 2015, we elected Supervisor John Phillips and Chris Lopez from Supervisor Simon Salinas' office, former Health Director Ray Bullock, and other staff in the county, along with representatives from the city of Greenfield, Gonzales, Soledad, and Salinas, participated in a session up in Seattle, Washington. The other member of this delegation that went up to Seattle included a pretty strong team from the Building Healthy Communities here in Salinas. This was followed up with a session supported by the California Endowment again in January of 2016 with the Board of Supervisors, department heads, and the public. In December of that year, we had another session with department heads to continue our deeper dive into this work and how it improves services to our constituents. In late 2016, the Board of Supervisors and the County Administrator, Dr. Lee Bauman, agreed on supporting a county team to participate in the Northern California cohort of the Government Alliance on Racial Equity, starting in February of 2017. Our county team has been participating in this cohort monthly for meetings in OPEC. The county team consists of Rosemary Soto, who's here with us, Dr. Yvonne Walker from Human Resources, Dr. Jill Walker from the Behavioral Health Bureau of the Health Department, Krista Hani, Dr. Krista Hani also from the Health Department. We've had Joanne Iwamoto from the Office of the County Administrative Office, Cristobal Oropesa Saraga from the Health Department. We've had Colleen Bai and Wendy Askew from District 4 participate, along with Juan Rodriguez, who's our Equal Opportunity Officer, and Joey Holsworth, who's the Child Support Services Director. Additionally, we've invited and participants from the Probation Department. We've had staff from District 4, District 5, District Supervisory, District 5. We've had participation from MNC, elections, and the public defender. What we're trying to do is make sure that we include everybody in this discussion, which is very productive. As I mentioned, GARE is a national network. GARE is a national network of governments working together to achieve racial equity and advance opportunities for all. As part of our county team, we participate, as I mentioned, up in Oakland with cities, counties, and state jurisdictions in the northern region of this effort. There's also a Southern California cohort that is up and running. As part of this, we share learning experiences from other jurisdictions as we move along with our efforts in this arena. We also get technical assistance from the agency that's running the services. And again, it's an effort to gradually engage all our county departments in this effort. So with that, let me pass it on to Rosemary Soto, who's here with Juan Rodriguez and Krista Hani.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
Good morning, members of the board, Madam Chair. Adams, thank you for this opportunity to share this update. I do want to share a little bit more about the team that we have begun to build. We found that it is imperative to have a strong core team that will serve as the backbone of this journey of not just learning and wrapping our heads around the practices of governing for racial equity, but also the implementation and integration of these principles within our government. What we first began with is just defining our own purpose and principle as a team, as representatives of Monterey County, and we found that it was very fitting that we follow what was asked of us as part of this cohort membership. Was we were asked to name our team, and we decided to name ourselves Seven Generations, Team 7G, and that is based on the Native American principle that urges us to do the work that we're doing not only for the benefit of our own experiences and those that come with us, but those that come after us. So perhaps we may not see the complete impact of our work and the fruits of our labor during our time, but we anticipate that it will be impactful for the next 7 generations. A big part of why we felt that it was important to build this core team was that we also come to a shared understanding of what it is to identify and understand the intricacies of institutional and systemic racism. Most importantly, in this process of learning what it really means to us in terms of policies and practices. So identifying how do we apply specific tools that help us advance racial equity in our local government, as we're learning that in any government institution it is not only a pragmatic process, but it is also a transformational process of systems, but aside from that, of hearts and minds. We understand the root causes of many of our complex social issues that we are dealing with on a daily basis can be connected and related to the historical institutional racism that might have existed before us. And in order to be able to understand what that means and how do we begin to unravel that and dismantle that and in its place implement and institute policies and practices that intentionally consider the promotion of equity by the use of racial equity tools that assist us in conducting a systemic examination of how different racial and social groups will likely be affected by any of our proposed actions or decisions. We've come to a point where we are beginning to learn about how do we strategically identify opportunities within our local government system to be able to adapt and use of these tools so that then we can continue on this, what we call it as a long-term process of implementing the work that we're learning so much about. I do want to share with you that part of our ask to you today is to not only formally adopt a resolution to support the advancement of the work of governing for racial equity, but we are also asking that you consider an equity statement that this team has worked on, and I will, it is included in your packet, but I will read it to you now for the sake of the audience and just as a reminder to what it means to us. The equity statement states, for many, Monterey County is a great place to live, work, play, and learn, yet many experience deep and persistent inequities, especially by place and race, that threaten prosperity. Current times call for strengthening of our efforts to understand, respect, and celebrate the diverse experiences and realities of all those we work with and serve. We now renew our efforts to ensure those who are disproportionately impacted by racial inequities, whether by our own actions or inactions, are guaranteed equitable solutions. This will include both revision and creation of programs and policies that are data-driven, community-informed, transparent, accountable, and sustainable. In this way, we will ensure that Monterey County as a community will have opportunity for advancement and contributions regardless of where they live, how much money they make, or the color of their skin, and can lead to a healthy, fulfilling, and productive life. With this, I do want to share this next image, of which most of us are familiar with. A big part of what we're learning in this process as well is the process for delving deeper into the understanding of what is the difference between equality and equity. And so this is a big part of what we're looking at when we are identifying opportunities for adapting our policies and practices with the use of these tools that help us look at all of what we do through a racial equity lens. With this, I do want to share that our team here has worked diligently on identifying some of these specific areas, and a goal of the conclusion of this first cohort with GARE is that we develop an action plan that includes a framework and that specifically outlines what those opportunities are, how have we explored them throughout this year's process, and how we intend to move forward. And we are beginning to explore these options with other departments and other jurisdictions that have expressed interest in participating in this. So we're sharing a lot of the learning that we're acquiring as we go. With that, I do want to pass this over to my colleague, Dr. Krista Hahn, who will share a little more about that.
Madam Chair, supervisors. So when we look at health outcomes in the county, we do see a wide variety of racial inequities in those health outcomes, whether it's for diabetes, for heart disease, for obesity, for consumption of fruit and vegetables. We do see that in the county. And sometimes people, they talk about, well, then people just need to make a different choice. But really, it's not about choice solely. If you look at this pie chart, you can see that really 50% of what drives health is affected more by factors, socioeconomic factors in the physical environment. Things potentially that don't relate so much to choice as the environment in which you live that are generally determined by policies around you. And why is it important? Well, as even one person that said when we were doing our strategic planning for the health department, that if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And I think everyone can relate to that, but then how do we help, reduce those inequities? And when we look at within our county, even compared to California, we can see that we have a number of socioeconomic inequities even compared to California. And I'll draw your attention in particular to the ones that relate to education, where we have 29% of the people in our county without a high school diploma compared to 19% in California. And then over on the other side of the slide, my right, 1 in 10 Monterey County public school children are homeless. So that's not their choice. It's the environment around them, the conditions around them that have contributed to that. Well, as we all know, it probably would be very difficult, and probably is very difficult, to attain great marks in school if your family's dealing with the stressors around homelessness. Next slide. And really what this translates to for health in our county, this is looking at premature death rates in our county in relation to percentage of the population with a 12th grade education or greater. And we have higher premature death rates in our county in communities where we have lower education rates, is essentially what's going on. And if we were to look at premature death rates by region in the county, it also translates out to where you live can contribute to you dying earlier in our county.
Good morning, Honorable Board of Supervisors. Juan Rodriguez, Equal Opportunity Officer. So what's the good news? The good news is that a lot of the principles here, they're already a part of us. I hate to read slides, but I'll read the first part of this one, which is the county's mission statement. It is the mission of Monterey County to excel at providing quality services for the benefit of all Monterey County residents while developing, maintaining, and enhancing the resources of the area. So all these things we're talking about, equality, equity, we already have made an intentional decision to try to obtain that for the residents of Monterey County. Of course, there's more to do and we can be a lot more intentional with it. So the Board of Supervisors, the department heads, and the Monterey County workforce has been a little bit more intentional. Of course, we have, as Mr. Gonzalez mentioned, the Board of Supervisors as champions, and this is a project that they have, or the board has taken on since 2014, 2015. The department heads, and which Jody and I are part of, and also the interdepartmental GARE cohort is another piece of it. And I see it as a way to plant seeds within the county workforce, within the people that are providing the services to the community. We do obviously appreciate the top-bottom commitment to this, but I think it's also very important to make it a grassroots and to make it a bottom-up type of effort. The interdepartmental GARE cohort is an example of how this could be done, I guess, at the medium level. I thoroughly enjoyed working with people from different departments that I would normally not work with, and be able to discover that a lot of the things that I want to do in my department, there's either people already wanting to do it, or light years ahead of what we were planning. So we're able to collaborate, and we're able to move a little bit quicker than if we operated as a silo. Another thing that going along with this theme of planting seeds, as you know, the Board of Supervisors mandated a county-wide equal opportunity and non-discrimination training. One of the, and with the same thing of using the resources that are already available to us, one of the things that the GARE cohort decided to do was to plant these seeds, and we have started to talk about in that training a little bit of what GARE is and how we're trying to engage the community and give some of the basic concepts. Some of you have taken the training, and you know that there's much more work to do it in this sense, but we're working on it, and next year we'll have a little bit more intentionality, if that's a word, to this piece of communicating to the workforce so it develops from the ground up. So, as I think Rosemary mentioned, it should be a data-driven decision-making process. We have the Governing for Racial Equity indicators, and like Dr. Hani mentioned also, we have the numbers, we have the statistics. We should be able to be comfortably talking about those statistics. I debated whether using the phrase low-hanging fruit, because when we're trying to change a organization and trying to do things differently, it's never low-hanging, but some of the most obvious things, for example, and we can have a lot, we can do a lot more, but one of the things that we can do to apply now or in the very near future, the concepts of GARE to county government is to, for example, look at funding decisions, and every time we make a decision of that nature, to talk about whether or not we're going to make the most impact in terms of equity and equality. Managing for results, making departments and department heads accountable for them to look at the whether or not we look at these factors when making a decision for our departments, prioritize projects, who needs it the most versus who is more vocal. Sometimes a decision will come to that. Performance measurement for key employees that have touched GARE, maybe make it a part of the performance evaluation. Have you considered GARE factors, racial equity indicators, and the decisions that you're taking? And program evaluation, we can go back in time and really talk about the numbers and make sure that we are taking into account those racial equity indicators in continuing with those programs.
We do want to emphasize that we embrace the power of, and we uplift the power of community voice in this process as well. So with that, we are also continuing our efforts to create opportunities for continuous and meaningful community engagement. Thus far in this process, we have engaged the Equal Opportunity Advisory Commission, the Commission on the Status of Women. We have held public safety efforts, community forums throughout the county. We intend to continue those, and also intend to engage groups that attend those forums in learning about our work in advancing racial equity. We also have engaged the Transportation Authority of Monterey County, which is a collective of various representatives of all jurisdictions within the county and have begun the conversation of exploring opportunities around the areas that this governing body touches. We've also connected with the Behavioral Health, Cultural Relevancy, and Humility Committee. So these are simply just a few that we have engaged, and we understand and know that there are many other groups that we can engage. I do also want to mention that the work around learning and implementing racial equity practices is not done solely by the county at this point. There are other entities around the county that have begun this process as well, and that includes the city of Salinas and other philanthropic groups around the county have also been engaged in this learning process separately from us, but however, we do see that there are definitely opportunities in the future to connect dots and make sure that we're all working together with some sense of cohesion so that we are building the power within our work and within our respective areas.
Madam Chair, that concludes our presentation. I do want to take a minute to thank the Board of Supervisors for their support. Also want to thank Dr. Baumann for his support in moving this effort forward with support of the cohort. I would also like to thank the department heads who have allowed their staff to make this big commitment on providing the staff that is part of the cohort, because it does take a lot of time and effort to be part of this. A couple of other thank yous and I'll be done. Thank you. I would like to thank Lauren Valverde from the California Endowment, because through her efforts, we've been able to participate in many of these sessions, as well as including with the Building Healthy Communities. They've been very instrumental in moving this effort forward in the county. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions, but that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. First, we'll go to the board for questions, then we'll do public comment, then board comment, and then we'll take a vote. So, are there any questions from the board at this point?
On the equity statement, it said deep and persistent inequities, especially by place and race, that threaten prosperity. What is that? Not sure I know.
So when we were coming up with that statement, what we were recognizing was that when you have ongoing inequities, that not everybody's been able to be contributing to society at the highest rate, and that can impact the economic viability and progress within a community or across the county. And moving forward, and what studies have shown is when you reduce inequities, you have much more economic vitality. And thinking again for that, that 7G perspective, how we're thinking about our generations of the future, it really makes sure that our county is as economically viable as possible moving forward into the future.
Thank you. Supervisor, questions there? Supervisor, questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just a couple questions. I appreciate the report and the opportunity to recommit to governing for racial equity values and actions. So I see that the GARE cohort training is a year. I'm curious about what's available after that. Will there be support for the cohort? How do we ensure training for county staff? Because I think, a lot of this stuff is pretty subtle. We don't see the water we're swimming in, so I think it's, it just seems to me we're going to need some more support here, so I'm just curious what's available from a training perspective.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Parker, I think that the staff that provides the GARE training has been extremely helpful, and I think they're committed to continuing this effort. I know that they had a cohort from last year that they're still supporting, so they continually offer trainings and information to cohorts that go through their training. So that will continue. I think that once we, as part of the cohort that we're in right now, our plan is to come back with a plan that the board will officially approve and will include some of the issues, some of the items that you've identified. to be as we move this up the floor, because it will require that the board come back and support it, continue to support this effort. So that will all be part of the plan that we bring back to the board for your consideration.
Thank you. And speaking of the plan, can you give us an idea of when we're likely to see that action plan? And can you also, while we wait, give us an idea of some of the things that you're looking at to include in it?
Let me touch on that. But I think the plan right now is to finish our training. I think it ends in November, December, and then they will help us continue to craft the plan itself. I'm hoping that we can bring back that plan in early spring, late winter, maybe February, March, sometime in that time frame. And Rosemary may be able to address some of the other.
I'm sorry, Supervisor, would you repeat the last part of your question?
Yes, can you just give us an idea of some of the, more specific things you're looking at in the action plan? Just, you don't have to go into detail, but, give us an idea of what you're looking at including.
Sure. That is the most exciting question, perhaps, because we are very, very thrilled to identify some of these opportunities so far. But I do want to say that we are looking at how these areas that we are exploring, do they have both internal and external impact in terms of community. We understand that a lot of the work is internal first, and we might see a lot of the internal results before we do the community impact, but that is definitely something that we are taking into consideration when we look at these opportunities for identifying policy areas. Just a couple of quick examples. We're looking at our internal human resources processes and how we hire and how we promote and support those who are moving into promotional positions. Are they provided with the resources, the support, and leadership development tools that are going to help them be successful in those new roles. We are also looking at trainings across the board in terms of how do we best prepare our county team, our county staff overall. And other areas that we're looking at is how we make our budget decisions. An example would be perhaps on capital improvement projects. What are the prioritization criteria that our teams are looking at within that department and within that process? Perhaps there are several items within that criteria that are very important, but could also benefit from including tools that look at the racial equity lens in that process. And those are just a couple of examples that I can just share, and of course those are some that we've talked about, we've identified, but we're in the process of exploring the feasibility and how do we actually do that. And that takes time, and it also takes engagement with the respective staff members so that they can provide that section, their expertise in that process, because we of course some are not engineers and we may not have that area of knowledge, but yet we want to bring the racial equity lens to that perspective.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just add to that, I think one of the other things that we've discussed as a group is how do we develop a better community engagement piece countywide. We talked about that and maybe creating some templates to make sure that we identify who we address and how we better communicate with the public. So that's one of the other things that we know.
Thank you. Supervisor, do you have any questions at this point?
I think my questions were already asked by Supervisor Parker, but I did want to just take an opportunity to commend our sizable number of staff who have been part of this cohort, who took a day out of their busy schedule once a month, drive all the way through Oakland, through traffic and back to participate in this type of training. For me, I find that very commendable and a real commitment from our staff to benefit from this training. And I know it was with the support of California Endowment, but it's really trying to train ourselves, and that even as elected officials, we go to trainings to try to find out best practices, different ways of including people in our communities who don't have a voice, or procedures and policies that could make our county serve our communities better. But I think this is training is, and the plan that I look forward to seeing couldn't come at a better time because, as you mentioned, not only in terms of having policies that have our county and our county staff reflect the communities we serve, but finding ways to better include their voices in the decision-making, so that make sure that we're properly serving those communities. But also when we make decisions up on this dais, that that we're also, as you said, taking equity into account, because for far too long, there's been way too many communities and neighborhoods when we talked about resources that didn't have those delivered, and they've been neglected for far too long. So now when we're talking about, our next item on the agenda is looking at Measure X and SB1 monies. That should be taken into account. Your training could really be a guiding light of how we distribute and utilize those resources. When we talk about millions of dollars in new cannabis money, we should be looking at how we could use those resources to address those areas with some of the greatest needs and challenges in Monterey County. So I think this is very important work. I think it's groundbreaking for Monterey County to undertake this, but it's also important how we implement, how we utilize that information that you're learning and help us be able to, I think, make some better decisions in our capacity as for the folks who vote on these matters that come before us. So I want to really commend you all for your tremendous work.
Thank you. Now we'll go to the public for comment on this item. And I have two speakers lined up, Cesar Lara and Sue Paris.
Good afternoon, members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm Cesar Lara, I'm the Policy Director for Building Healthy Communities. And I'm here in support of the equity statement and the resolution, and really an opportunity for the Board of Supervisors to revisit their mission statement and how can we make government more efficient. Because at the root of it, that's what governing for racial equity is. In my opportunity, I've had an opportunity to attend a number of trainings around governing for racial equity. One of the opportunities I had was actually a network meeting of over 60 communities across the nation that have implemented GRE, and speaking to them and understanding that it's not a magic pill, but it's an opportunity to really look at how can we make government more efficient and how can it service its residents that it's supposed to be servicing. How can it be more of a welcoming door, but at the same time, look into consideration of race. And the factors that are around race that Dr. Henny pointed out are stresses in our community. And as government officials, you have the opportunity to really make government more efficient. So now more than ever, we are looking to policies, practices, and programs, especially in the time that we're living in our nation's history, for government to really step up. And I really commend the staff that are going through the GARE training, and I understand that they started in February, and at the end having an implementation tool and having a RIA tool, which is a way that government could use to look at the decisions that are making is an important tool, and that we look forward to continuing to support as a building healthy communities. The process that this government entity is taking, we also have a cohort through the city of Salinas, and we look forward to working with other cities across Monterey County to really look at making Monterey County a model, taking into consideration that other communities. But the positive thing about it is that we come with tools. This governing for racial equity was pioneered in Kings County in Seattle, and they had no roadmap. And now that it's in a number of communities across the nation, I look forward to working with Monterey County through the building healthy communities to really look at how to make the government more efficient, but look and really take a hard look at ourselves and take into consider race and the stresses out in the community, and make government more welcoming, and find a tool for a community to be more involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lara.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. I'm Sue Paris. I live in Pacific Grove, and I'm here representing Whites for Racial Equity, which is a volunteer group of people who identify as white and want to eliminate racism because it's good for us. It's good for everyone, it's good for us. And I'm also here representing the National Coalition Building Institute, which is a nonprofit local chapter here in Monterey County, and our aim is to eliminate prejudice and discrimination. We do that through a combination of focusing on healing and focusing on action. I'm really excited about the work that's being done here in the county on governing for racial equity. The elements of it are very consistent with the work that we do. It seems very clear to me that if what we're doing doesn't work for everybody, that it doesn't work. And it's been taking us all a long time to get to that point. I think that it's important not to dwell on that we feel bad or we want it to be someone's fault for it not working, and I think that's one of the kind of the guilt or the deflecting blame is something that slows us down on that. I think one of the things that's great about governing for racial equity is that it does provide tools, that there are specifics. There's certainly research from within and without this program about the ways that making sure that systems work for everyone does actually benefit everyone. So the ways that specific populations are being disadvantaged by particular decisions that we make, policy decisions and procedures, can, by addressing that, can actually improve things for the people that they weren't even intended to help. As I said, I do live in Pacific Grove. I think that it's really important that we all realize that this does affect all of us. One of the things that I'm excited about, the work that's being done in Salinas, the work that's being done in the county, is that I want this in Pacific Grove. I want it all over the county. I want my city to adopt these practices. And the last thing I'd like to say is that with the DACA decisions, with this and with a lot of other things you do, there is always going to be pushback, and I just want you to know that there are a lot of people out there, including people who look like me, that have your back and that really respect the work that you do, and we want to help in any way we can. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Any further comments from the board? Supervisor Phillips?
Yeah, I thank you for your report.
You went up there.
As you
Go,
know,
Joe, you want to?
Years ago, I went back to a forum on government for racial equality in Seattle, and it was helpful. We learned maybe not to be defensive as a decision maker, that inequities, if they exist, may not be your fault personally, they just may exist. And you found it helpful to look at life as it exists in the community, maybe from some other people's eyes that are a little different than yours, that may view things differently. But I came away with my time in Seattle feeling Monterey County did a pretty good job of giving everybody a fair shot, regardless of what racial background they can. I agree we can do more and maybe more intentional about it, and I'm sure you're learning that in these, but I was pretty impressed with how Monterey County stacked up against some of the other communities that we encountered when I was in Seattle.
Thanks, Supervisor.
Just want to thank the staff for bringing this forward. I think when we started a couple of years ago, it seemed so abstract to me, and I said, I like to look at real things. How do we start solving some of the problems? But it is longer term. To do introspection, to look at yourself, if you're an employee of one of the 5,000 that we have here, to make sure that everybody's contributing to identifying areas, for example, lack of resources. So we do want to provide some of that equity. And I deal with the valley communities. A lot of times we see the gaps in services. So I think we're slowly now, I think everybody recognizing there is a gap down here. So maybe Salinas, we wait here because there's a need and we're trying to balance things out to make sure that we try to address all the needs that our community staff, especially with the lack of resources. So I know that hopefully we'll get there some point, like I said, 7Gs or whatever it is for the next generation, that we do build a better community here in Monterey County. And so I thank you for that, for working through this all, and so that at the end people understand it's not just an abstract discussion here, but that it has real implications and consequences for the community.
Oops, thank you. Supervisor Leavenworth? Supervisor Crawford?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I go ahead and move the staff recommendation, and if there's a second, I'll
Second.
I have a couple comments. Thank you. I just have a couple little, well, hopefully a clarification. In the equity statement, in that second paragraph, I think what's meant is opportunity for advancement and contribution regardless of where people live, but there's never been any mention of people in the preceding part of the sentence. So instead of using the word they, you might want to think about using the word people. Just one of those little things that I notice sometimes. And then just a more general comment, I really appreciate the commitment to review and create programs and policies. And I just would say that as a practical matter, we probably want to start with reviewing existing policies and amending those and current practices. I don't know how much capacity we have for taking on new, creating new programs and so on, but I know that there are ways that we don't even know yet that we can incorporate racial equity into existing programs, practices, and services that we offer. And then I just want to say I really appreciated the public comment about, if it doesn't work for some, it doesn't work, period. And the example that I can't remember which training I was in where I heard it was it's kind of the restroom example. Either at sporting events or concerts or pretty much anywhere, you notice that men can go to the restroom at intermission pretty quickly and come out and proceed with whatever else they want to do, getting food, or and women line up, takes a long time. And of course, we know it doesn't work for women, right? But to the extent that women are at these events with men, the men have to wait around for the women. It's not working for them either, really. And I just thought that was kind of a beautiful example that we can all recognize that doesn't have much to do with race. It has something to do with gender, but it has to do with planning and not thinking things through. And so nobody did it on purpose. It just exists. And so I think there are probably a myriad of examples. I look forward to working on some of the ones we've been hearing about health disparities for quite a while, but we can just imagine there are others as well that we can be working on. So thank you so much for the work you're doing, and I look forward to the action plan and future developments.
Thank you, Supervisor Parker. So I erred in that I missed someone who wished to make comment, and if you could please just keep it to 1 minute so that we can move forward. Go ahead, please, with your comments.
Ms. Parker mentioned the things maybe just kind of happened that we overlooked. I'll have to agree with her on that. The abortion of our children is something that we take for granted. We just think that it's just a right. The Supreme Court said it's right. Never mind that the Supreme Court of Heaven has always said it's murder and it's wrong. That is something that this government must take a leading role in defending those rights. Talk about having no voice. They have no voice. We are their voice. We are their voice. We hear all this about the future. They are our future. They are our future, but they're not here in this chamber. They don't have political allies, paid consultants. They are truly, and the minorities, they target. Planned Parenthood Corporation targets minorities. That evil corporation, the head of which gets $900,000 a year.
Thank you, and I gave you 1 minute and you exceeded it, and I appreciate very much your understanding.
I'll be
1 minute.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is George Villa. I'm I'm a local resident, also a program assistant for REAP, nonprofit Jim Warner. I just would like to say that I attended 2 community GRE forums in the past years, and what I got out of it was that there's, policies and practices that are in place that just haven't been working. Some of it are institutional, some of it has to do with community, but I really like the language that they're talking about, especially where there's equity and there's funding involved. Why is it that East Salinas has like the least funding for parks and public education, and you wonder why there's a health problem going on? And I really like how they're talking about how our health is impacted by the policies and practices that are in place, and I think this is just trying to fix the problem. We're humans, we make mistakes all the time. I make mistakes all the time, but I'm now still getting my life together. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks.
We opened up the can of worms, sorry about that. West White, Salinas resident. Just want to say, with Charlottesville and Zach, we've kind of been going at this, so there's honestly a lot of community support that's probably left untapped, that's fresh, it's energized, and is ready to go. So include me in these future emails, please, for the next meetings that this happens, please. For your card, and then we'll definitely get the word out, and we'll get the community really energized, and we can do collaborative.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now, just before I bring it to a vote, I just want to weigh in personally and just say again how thankful I am that we have you here, and how proud I am that Monterey County is standing up to the plate early and often. I really look at you guys as the leaders of this, and I'm very appreciative of it. The thought of having our county be a model is exactly one of the reasons why I chose to enter public service, because I feel we've got it in our county to be the best. So you are, and I thank you so much for what it is that you're doing. I heard James speaking of it, and I was thinking, is it just racial equity or is it gender equity? And it's all of it. It's simply a word that is being used, but it's all of it. And I just was so touched by the symbol of that you used, the one tall child, with the difference between equality and equity. And it was such a clear picture, and it reminded me of something that I heard years and years ago that Lyndon Johnson said once in a speech he was giving. He said it's when he was talking about civil rights, and he said it's unfair to put 2 people in a race and expect them to have the same outcome when one has been hobbled for years. And I think that this is many, many, many decades down the line, but those words resonated with me. And there's probably some child someplace who's hearing the work that we're doing who will keep those words in his or her ears as well. So thank you again, and on that I'd like to take the vote to receive the report, to adopt the resolution, and to proclaim Monterey County's commitment to advance governing for racial equity. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for that.